Hello, psychology. So we are going to continue our study of learning and conditioning. And today we're going to talk about the type of conditioning we are referring to as operant conditioning. So I'm going to guess that you actually know all about this. You just haven't put the terminology to practice yet. So if you can remember sometimes in maybe a class or for an icebreaker at a youth group or some kind of team building activity, if you've ever done the activity where you send somebody out of the room and when they come back in, they are trying to find something in the room. And the way that they find that thing in the room is by having the classmates or people that you're working with, maybe they clap. And the louder that they clap, the closer they get to whatever it is that they're looking for. And they start to learn that, ooh, louder clapping means I'm getting closer. And what they are doing is reinforcing their movement towards whatever the item is. And in a nutshell, that's really operant conditioning. But we need to understand the terminology and understand some of the vocabulary and how it really works. So here we go. So let's give us a definition. We got to start with a definition, as we always do with psychology terms. And operant conditioning, the key word there is operant. It's like you're going to operate on something. You're going to do something. You're going to change something. So operant conditioning is a method of learning that occurs through rewards and punishments, whatever your behavior is. And operant, the actual word operant, refers to any active behavior that operates upon, there's where operant conditioning comes from, any active behavior that operates upon the environment to generate consequences. That's really kind of complicated, but if you can remember that operant conditioning, if you can remember the keywords rewards and punishments, because that's what this is all based upon. And I have some really good clips that we'll look at in class and do some fun activities and definitely some practice. So we need to start from the beginning and where operant conditioning kind of became a thing in psychology. And the person that kind of discovered this or put a name on this was a man by the name of Edward Thorndike. And Thorndike came up with a term called the law of effect. And really, he was taking animals and putting them in some kind of cage or a box and wanted to see if he could create some desirable outcomes and wanted those desirable outcomes to be able to be repeated. And then he wanted to come up with a way to make the undesirable outcomes actually stop. And so he would kind of choose which things would provide an incentive or create this desirable outcome and also the undesirable outcome. And so Thorndike's law of effect kind of becomes known as sort of the puzzle box. And these animals would have a little bit of a maze that they might have to navigate, and they might be rewarded with either getting out of the box or sometimes food, but it became pretty easy to be able to reinforce or weaken certain types of behavior. But the guy that we really focus on and the one that we really connect to operant conditioning is this guy here, and his name is B.F. Skinner. And he is kind of the behaviorist of all behaviorists. Pavlov, we associate with classical conditioning, but Skinner is the guy that we are going to connect to operant conditioning. And he really, from the time he started practicing until the time of his death, I mean, he really is probably the one psychologist that we can say that his discoveries and his research really solidified a lot of what we know and understand about human behavior. And he was much more interested in how the consequences of our actions influenced behavior. And that's really the core of behaviorism. And so what Skinner did was he designed something that we know as the Skinner box, okay? And Skinner really wanted to see if rewards and punishments would work with animals. Do they respond in that way? And so typically inside these boxes, he would use pigeons a lot of times. He would use rats. And there would always be some sort of bar or key that the animal could press. And so we know that we respond well to reinforcements and punishments. But what Skinner wanted to know was exactly how did that happen? Okay, what is it about our behavior that makes us want to get that reward or avoid a punishment? And so when the rat is crawling around in its cage, presses down the little food bar, and out comes the food, oh, that's a good thing. The rat is going to want to do that some more. And Skinner would track and documented the findings and the response rate. And really, we know that operant conditioning is a powerful part of our everyday lives. I mean, you can see it play out at the grocery store. You know, if you've ever stood behind a family where you have a kid who's just, he's going crazy in the cart and crying and screaming and I want. And so maybe the parent gives them a treat or says, I'm going to buy you this. And what happens to the child? The child instantly shuts up because the parent has positively reinforced the misbehavior. The kid now knows, ooh, I can do this again and get something I want. Your pets are great examples of how powerful operant conditioning works. You know, you train your animals to do certain tricks or to sit or to wait for certain things, and then they get a treat. They learn that there is a reward if they do a certain type of behavior. So let's take a look at some of this terminology, okay? And the first word that we need to look at is reinforcement. And reinforcement is going to strengthen a behavior. There's something that you're doing that I want to make sure you keep doing it. So I want to reinforce that. I want to strengthen that behavior. I want to increase how often you do something. And a reinforcement stimulus is going to happen every time the desired behavior happens. And it involves the most amount of effort and resources. Okay, you really got to do something, and you have to reward a behavior quickly in order for it to become a learned behavior. Okay, you know, maybe getting good grades. Maybe that's a reinforcing stimulant for you. You know, receiving compliments for you know, some great shoes that you're wearing or anything like that. That is reinforcement, and you understand what it is. But again, we're trying to put it in terms of psychology. So before we jump too far and start really talking about positive and negative reinforcements and punishment, let's stop for a second and look at what we call primary reinforcement. And primary reinforcements are really things that just happen naturally, okay? And these are things that very often are evolutionary in terms of their origin, and they may be there because of things like survival. We need food, we need air, sleep, water, sex, all of these things. These are primary reinforcements. the very, very basic. Secondary reinforcement or reinforcers are very often conditioned reinforcers, and they involve stimuli that have become rewarded by being paired with something else. Okay, we have learned that if we go to the movie that we will get some candy, and we have been conditioned to think that that's what happens every time we go to the movie, and in a sense that is a secondary reinforcer. So we're going to be looking at operant conditioning, and we have to be sure that we really are clear about the terms positive and negative. Okay, and if we are talking about the term positive, we are adding something. So a positive reinforcement, those are going to be favorable events or outcomes that are presented after the behavior. And it is the addition of a reinforcing stimulus so that that behavior is much more likely to happen again in the future. Okay, if you do a good job at work, your manager might give you a bonus. Okay, that would be a positive reinforcement. I'm going to give you a bonus so that you keep doing a good job. I want to see that behavior continue. I want to see that good behavior even increase. Okay, that is positive reinforcement. Negative reinforcement, okay, you still want to see a behavior. You want to see a certain behavior increase, but now you're going to take something away. Okay, negative reinforcement is going to involve the removal of some kind of unfavorable event or outcome right after there has been a behavior that is bad, negative. It's a response or behavior strengthened by stopping, removing, or avoiding a negative outcome or aversive stimulus. If your child starts to scream in the middle of the grocery store, but stops once you give them a treat, you're going to be more likely to hand him a treat the next time he screams because it works. We want to take away the screaming. Okay, so I'm going to reinforce the idea that your screaming will stop by giving you a treat. Your action led to the removal of an unpleasant condition. Okay, so negative reinforcement eliminates something painful or annoying, but by doing that, you're reinforcing it to not happen again. You put up an umbrella to avoid getting wet in the rain. You want to remove getting wet. And I want to stop getting wet, so I put up an umbrella. You clean your room so your mom will stop nagging you. Okay, you want to remove the nagging. Okay, you want to reinforce that behavior that mom is no longer going to nag me. So in order to do that, I'm going to clean my room. We are gonna have to practice these examples in class. So now we have to talk about maybe a punishment and a punishing stimulus. So punishment is the presentation of an adverse event or outcome that causes a decrease in the behavior that it follows. So when you are talking about a punishment, you are doing this because you want a behavior to stop or you want a behavior to decrease. Okay, and think about maybe how some of your parents might have disciplined you. Was there reinforcement or was there punishment? And as we talk about punishment, it doesn't always have to be, super negative. Okay, punishment is just trying to get a behavior to stop. So positive punishment it presents an unfavorable event or an outcome. But we want to weaken the response that it follows. So a positive punishment, we're going to add something to the situation in order to decrease that behavior. So an employee is criticized by their supervisor after they get to work late. Okay, so positive, we are adding something. We are adding the criticism. Why? Because we don't want them to come to work late anymore. We want to stop that behavior. So we are going to add that punishment. Another example, you're given a detention because you were texting in class. So we added a detention to stop the behavior of texting in class. Okay, that is an example. That's what positive punishment is. Negative punishment. Negative meaning you're going to take something away. Negative punishment, punishment by removal. Again, you want to stop a behavior. In order to stop the behavior, you're going to take something away. So you are grounded for coming home late. I am taking away your freedom to get you to stop coming home late. Your teacher takes away your phone. So I'm going to take away that phone in order to get you to stop having your phone out in class. Okay, you lose your license after a DUI. Your license, your privilege of driving goes away because you are not going to drive under the influence anymore. Okay, that is a negative punishment. So the next thing is what's called token reinforcer. And this is probably something we've talked about in class before in the realm of like a token economy. And a token reinforcer is just something that can be exchanged for other reinforcers. It can be exchanged for material reinforcers or services or privileges. So in order, when you complete a task, then you get a prize. When you are here for so many hours, then you get overtime. Okay, those are considered to be token reinforcers. A couple other terms that relate to operant conditioning. One of them is shaping, and this goes right along with that example I gave at the start of this video about responding to the applause. The more applause I get, I think I'm closer. And it's a procedure where reinforcers gradually guide an animal, a person's actions towards a desired complex behavior. Okay, you've got to reward things constantly. It has to be in successive approximations. So you've got to do it continually to get that final desired behavior. Okay, and you have to be completely ignoring the behavior that you don't want to reinforce. Okay, another term is what's called chaining, and chaining will break a task down into small steps, and you reinforce those small steps. And once you have mastered a certain step, maybe you don't get rewarded for that little step because now you have already learned that behavior and it doesn't require reinforcement like it did before. Okay, there we are. So now you have a taste of what operant conditioning is all about. Now we got to come to class so we can practice.